Welcome to a special edition of In Focus Election Night. We're joining you live here on social media and online to bring you the very latest election results from across central Indiana. And as you see, there are the numbers from Indianapolis in the race we're watching closely tonight. Mayor Joe Hogsett with a 59-41 lead over Jefferson Shreve. I'm joined by a number of our panelists from In Focus, and more will be joining us here throughout our discussion this evening. Right now, Robin Winston, Mike Murphy, and Laura Wilson are with me. Mike, you are there at Shreve campaign headquarters tonight. He's about to speak. I'm watching behind me here on the monitor. You're right there. He's about to address his supporters after what appears to be a loss tonight in the race for mayor in Indianapolis. What's the mood there tonight?
Well, Dan, the mood is actually still pretty good despite the numbers. Hope runs springs eternal, so to speak, in the human breast when you're in politics, because a loss can turn into a win on a dime. The beer and wine is free. That's keeping people happy, I think, at this point. And it sounds to me like Jefferson's about ready to come on right now.
It appears that's the case, as you see behind Mike there. Robin, your thoughts on what appears so far to be a win for Mayor Hogsett as we get ready to listen to Jefferson Shreve?
This was a very tough campaign. Joe Hogsett, all those Saturday afternoons, going around to places in the community, talking with people, being visible, touching folks, talking about issues that matter at the kitchen table, I think resonated tonight. Jefferson Shreve ran a very competitive campaign. When you spend $300 per vote almost at this point to run for office, that's a lot of money per vote. But the real bottom line is that Joe Hogsett and the people of Indianapolis decided that we're going to take on issues and listen to a mayor who's seasoned, who's experienced, and who's ready to continue to lead our community.
Laura, what are your thoughts on this race? Again, one that Shreve spent a lot of money on as he begins to speak now downtown. He spent a lot of money on this race, but one that he was not able to prevail in here this evening.
Well, as Robin said, this really was a hard-fought race. Obviously, a tremendous amount of money and resources, but it's not just the funding, it's the effort, it's the time, it's the infrastructure. And I think what this tells us is a little bit about the voters, and certainly the confidence in terms of Joe Hogsett. This wasn't close for the outcome that we see thus far. It's not a close election result by any means. So clearly voters feel comfortable in Hogsett's vision. They feel very confident in what he has done in 8 years and certainly what he projects to do in the next 4. I do feel for the Shreve campaign because they put a lot of effort into it, but obviously Hogsett was very successful. And I think this really speaks to the way he was able to connect and resonate with voters. And in Indianapolis, they very clearly want him back for another 4 years.
Let's see if we can listen now as Jefferson Shreve, Mike's there. Jefferson Shreve is speaking to the crowd there in Indianapolis. Let's try to listen in.
Joe Hogsett, who I knew at that point would be my opponent, had won his reelect with 72% of the vote. And I said, I got the odds. And this was not a head decision to invest in this race and in our city. This has been a heart decision. This is our hometown. This is our city, and I'm convinced that it can be better. And in my visit with Joe Hogsett, Mayor Hogsett, a few minutes ago, I offered. He asked for, and I offered to be vigorously involved in trying to move our city forward, though as a private citizen.
So there you hear it at Shreve campaign headquarters. Jefferson Shreve saying that he spoke with Joe Hogsett moments ago, conceding this race tonight and saying that he wants to work with the mayor moving forward. I want to bring in some more of our panelists tonight as we discuss these results from around Indianapolis and around central Indiana. I want to turn here to Laura Beck, Democratic strategist. Your thoughts as we see Jefferson Shreve there on stage conceding now and Mayor Hogsett on his way to victory tonight. This certainly was a hard-fought race and one that was an expensive race, the most expensive race in the history of
Mhm.
Indianapolis mayoral campaigns, Laura.
Yeah, it was absolutely, and much of that was due in part to Jefferson Shreve being able to self-fund so much of the race. I think, though, there's also some history that's being made tonight, and that is that Joe Hogsett is now a three-term mayor in Indianapolis, and being a three-term mayor is a really hard thing to do. So congratulations are definitely in order for him. He ran a really strong campaign, and he had a really good campaign team behind him. They did not take their eye off the ball, and I think a lot of times what happens when you're in a race like that, that is competitive, and that is so closely watched, and there is so much funding behind it. It's really easy to get distracted, and they did not get distracted, and they really stayed focused throughout. So kudos to Mayor Hogsett, kudos to his team, and frankly, I mean, kudos to Jefferson Shreve for putting his hat in the ring and running. It's funny, I had the opportunity to be at early vote with him for some amount of time. I was there for a Democrat council candidate who's a good friend of mine, and he's a really nice guy, and really has some very positive thoughts about the city. I think probably what hurt him the most is simply that his campaign ads did not translate. He's a nice guy, and that just did not translate over into his ads. Whether you like it or not, those ads really do make a difference.
Tony Samuel is with us as well, 2016 vice chair from the Indiana Trump campaign. Tony, your thoughts on these results tonight and Jefferson Shreve's concession speech there downtown as he loses tonight to Mayor Joe Hogsett.
Well, first of all, Jefferson Shreve ran a strong race, and you've got to give him a lot of credit for investing his own funds. I mean, obviously, the guy does not need this job. He cares about the city. He cares about the people of Indianapolis. He cares about what's happening, and he wanted to make a change. He came up short tonight. I like the part where what he shared with us, that him and Mayor Hogsett have talked, and that he will be involved. I'd love to see that. I hope it really happens. As far as Mayor Hogsett, he's a good guy. I like him personally. There is work to be done. So I hope they don't rest on their laurels with a big win. There's a lot of things that need to improve in this city, and we'll see if it gets done.
Brian Gaddy and Martin Sweet are with us as well. Brian, your thoughts on these results we're seeing tonight in Indianapolis?
A Democrat.
Go ahead, Brian.
It just shows that Indianapolis is a Democratic city, and we can take our lead from other great Democratic Midwest cities like Chicago, Cleveland. Dan, you and I are very familiar with Cleveland, strong Cleveland roots. Detroit, all the great Midwest cities are Democrat cities, and Indianapolis can stand with them. I mean, this is a Democrat city. If Jefferson Shreve cannot win the mayor's race for the Republicans, I don't think anyone can. I mean, he spent almost $20 million. I mean, it was like $16 million of his own money, and he still lost. So we didn't believe in Shreve. We believe in Mayor Hogsett. And congratulations to my good friend, Mayor Hogsett.
Martin, and certainly Jefferson Shreve put a lot into this race. He made crime a very big issue. You pointed out on In Focus a couple weeks ago that a lot of the same issues that were at the forefront of this race in Indianapolis are really the same issues being talked about in a lot of mayoral races all around the country.
That's right. It's interesting, if you look at cities around the country, the only city that is larger than Indianapolis with a Republican mayor is Dallas. And that mayor was elected as a Democrat and switched parties to the Republican Party. I think so. You have to go down the list behind Indy. I think Fort Worth is the next. So really, other than Texas, you really have to go a long way down to get a Republican mayor of a large city, right? I think that demographic shift or trend, I guess, is probably here to stay for quite some time, that the American cities, as Brian said, really large metropolitan areas really are run by Democrats.
Robin, your thoughts on some of the numbers we're seeing overall around the state tonight? It looks like Fort Wayne's mayor is going to be reelected. Democrats may have, it looks like, flipped the mayor's office in Terre Haute. What's the overall outlook for your party tonight?
Well, those who said we didn't have a bench made a big mistake. Brandon Sackbun in Terre Haute won a race against an incumbent Republican mayor, very well liked, actually. But Brandon put a lot of boots on the ground, campaigned very hard. Tom Henry in Fort Wayne an outstanding campaign. Jim Mueller up in South Bend. And I don't know enough about Evansville yet. I'm sure those results are still coming in. But when you look at the cumulative, it's a very, very good night. And also keep in mind, Dan and everybody, that we made tremendous inroads into Hamilton County. This bodes well for 2024 for Democrats running statewide. So don't give up on us yet. I was around when Frank O'Bannon got elected, Glenda Ratz got elected, and a guy named Barack Obama got elected. So don't give up on Indiana yet. I think it'd be a big night. But let's not forget that Joe Hogsett, in spite of, I think, the fact that he spent close to $14 million of his own money in this race and had the support of former Governor Mitch Daniels, which clearly didn't resonate, showed that Joe Hogsett and the people of Indianapolis know what's best for our future. And that I talk to people all weekend, you can't singularly blame the mayor for crime. I think that was a mistake. There really wasn't a lot of visioning about this, but I also think that keep in mind, this bodes well for 2024 for our statewide candidates.
You mentioned Carmel there, Robin. The results tonight from Carmel are in, where Sue Finkham has been elected to be Carmel's next mayor. She won by 15 points over Miles Nelson in a race, Tony, that Democrats had hoped would be close. In the end, she won by double digits tonight in Carmel.
She ran a great race. I kept hearing throughout the last several weeks that she was, working harder than anyone, and the experience that she has in Carmel and on the city council was paying off. The numbers that I kept hearing weren't as were closer than this final margin, what looks like to be the final margin. So Republicans are strong still in Hamilton County and the Donuts. And I was in Zionsville and helping a little bit with the town council. We've got a Republican mayor, but Democrats didn't focus. They didn't run anybody against that Republican mayor. John Sterry's going to do a great job. But they
news
did
anchor here in
concentrate on the town
Indianapolis.
council, and we won all. Well, not all. We lost one by 60 votes, but won 6 out of 7 town council seats. So that bodes well for Zionsville.
Some of the other races around the area: Anderson Mayor Thomas Broderick Jr. reelected, defeating John Bell by 2 points tonight. In Anderson, in Lawrence, Deborah Whitfield appears headed to victory there. Democrats declaring victory in that race with a 4-point lead over Dave Hoffman, and Democrats appear headed to victory in Beech Grove as well. Laura Beck, I want to get your thoughts on the overall night from what you're seeing and hearing statewide from some of the results in these mayoral races so far.
Yeah, I think thanks for asking that question. And just to echo what Robin said, we tend to do really well, Democrats do, when it comes to mayoral races. And perhaps that's because cities aren't gerrymandered like some of our legislative districts are. I just actually got a alert from the Democratic Party that the Democrat Evansville mayor candidate won down there as well. So that's another one for us. I think it bodes well for us. And as Robin said, it's important when you talk about building a bench. We also are building a bunch of really strong leaders. I mean, Jim Kaufman in Beech Grove is a really smart rising star. Deb Whitfield, making history here in Marion County, especially in Lawrence. We also have some fresh faces that are going to be coming on to the City County Council. Brianne Delaney, who is a former deputy prosecutor, one-handedly. I think she probably hasn't slept for, I would say, the last maybe 6 weeks, which could have something to do with that. But it's a strong message. It's a message about keeping our cities moving forward. It's a message about setting aside partisanship and working together to get the job done. And in some cases, especially in the more urban areas, I do think that the national climate, with Trump hanging over us and some of the Democrats, that does motivate turnout in our more urban areas as well.
Adam Wren wrote about that in Politico this week. Mike, I want to get your thoughts on that, on how even local races to some degree have been nationalized by candidates at the local level. Did you see that happening here in this race? And what did you make of Jefferson Shreve's remarks behind you there at his watch party tonight as he conceded to Mayor Joe Hogsett? Mike, can you hear us?
It says my mic is muted, but I don't think it is. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you now, Mike. What
Okay.
was your
All right.
reaction to
Thank you.
Jefferson Shreve's remarks there tonight?
Well, I think it was a classy speech. I mean, we could not have asked for more from any candidate. Not only put his heart and soul into it, but he also put a good chunk of his fortune into it as well. He ran better than really any candidate since Mayor Ballard, who's here with us tonight. And, apparently we did pick up one seat in the council, which I know is a very small consolation. But, at some point, Joe Elsner and Anne Hathaway and the Republican powers that be are going to have to do some real soul searching and find out what can they make of Marion County going forward.
Laura, what are some of your overall observations on the evening, what we've seen here locally, and how that translates into a big election year next year, statewide in 2024?
Well, we did see, it looks like very good voter turnout, and we don't know entire numbers yet, but that's always something to look at and look forward to. Obviously, it's a local election cycle, so a high voter turnout is relatively low compared to congressional midterm or presidential. Still, we had great weather today. We have early voting centers. People have the ability to absentee vote. They're taking advantage of it. So I think the voter turnout was great. With regards to what Mike said in terms of like the down ballot races, very interesting if the Republicans don't pick up more than just that one, because it tells you not only was there confidence in Joe Hogsett, but to reaffirm what some others have said, right? Indianapolis is a very strong Democratic city, and that coattail effect, Hogsett was able to carry some of those Democrats through. I'm sure they earned it on their own right as well. But I was looking for that down ballot effect, and it seems that at least in Indianapolis, the Democrats did very strongly. I think the nationalization of issues is the biggest thing looking to next year. It is a national election. It is a presidential election, but how all of the issues that we're talking about right now are going to culminate. And when we're talking in Indiana, we're talking about president, we're talking about a gubernatorial race, right? There's a lot of races, U.S. Senate race on the ballot. So no shortage of positions, of candidates, of issues that we'll be looking at for the next election cycle.
Brian, what's your reaction to what we saw in terms of voter turnout? It's about 26% in Marion County, couple percentage points better than what we saw 4 years ago, but it wasn't the huge dramatic spike in voter turnout we were thinking we might see after we saw some of those early voting and absentee numbers. It turns out maybe what's really changing is the way people vote and when they vote. Turnout overall ended up being about the same when you add it all up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is still an issue that we still grapple with here in Indiana, is low voter turnout. And we've got, as a state, we've got to do better. I mean, we have some of the lowest voter turnout numbers of any state in the country. So I would hope that's an issue that we can come together. Democrats, like me and Robin and Laura, we can all come together, and then with our Republican friends, Tony, Mike, we ought to, as Hoosiers, want to get those numbers up. But I think overall, it's just these election results tonight just show just over and over again that Indianapolis is a Democrat city, and it's not going back to the Republicans. And quite frankly, we Hoosier Democrats can build on the strength of Indianapolis to make us more competitive in statewide races. It's like my good friend Robin said, don't count us out here in Indiana. I do think that we Democrats can make Indiana a more competitive state because of our strength in Indianapolis. We can build on that strength from Indianapolis and build and potentially have stronger statewide candidates.
But Martin, the Indianapolis suburbs were obviously a place where Democrats were hoping to make some inroads. They lost by double digits in the mayoral race. How do you see tonight's results setting up for 2024 overall, with a number of contested races on the ballot here in the Hoosier State next year?
Right. Well, I do think that Sue Finkham just overperformed. more so than most people predicted. In fact, more so than a lot of insiders in her campaign were telling me earlier today that they thought that she would do. So I sort of think she's a bit of an outlier, which is just sort of I think she's just a bit of a rock star candidate on her own. To quote the illustrious movie Knocked Up, it rhymes with smash motion, right? If you look at the national story, right, abortion is just playing everywhere. Ohio, it looks like voters have enshrined abortion into the Constitution. Democrats who would spend, think about 18-1 on Republicans in ads in Virginia. It looks like they're going to maintain the Virginia Senate. We still don't know about the General Assembly, the lower house just yet. And in Kentucky, Governor Beshear is going to be reelected. And one of the things that was crucial in that election is he had an absolutely devastating ad. And usually, I don't think political scientists pay a whole lot of attention to the power of ads, but we certainly have heard a lot from people on this one particular ad that was just absolutely devastating on abortion against the Attorney General Cameron. And so the nationalization of elections has been happening for a while. And what we've seen since Dobbs came down, overturning Roe, is that has been the single largest motivating factor. I think certainly, I know Laura talked about Trump as a motivating factor, but if you want to look to one thing and where Democrats can make hay all around the country is on this issue of abortion.
Laura, what's your reaction to that? And what, when it comes to nationalizing local races, we kind of saw that in the Indianapolis mayoral race. I mean, there were a number of ads referring to Jefferson Shreve's views on abortion, the fact that he was a delegate at the 2016 convention. How effective are ads like that in a local race where typically local issues are more important?
Well, I think I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this. I mean, I think there was one way we did things, and then 2016 happened, and now there's a different way we do things. I think Trump, just as Trump has torn down institutions and changed how we look at different strategies and the way we do different things, I think just in politics that's happened as well. So I think that those national issues, because of what we went through in 2016 and then 2020 and then the pandemic and January 6th and everything else that has followed that, I think that has made a major impact on how we deliver campaigns, how we message, how we develop strategies around them. Another piece I think also as well is that Mayor Hogsett and his team had a set of core messages, and they stuck to those core messages. We joke all the time in public relations and communications and in the comms world, you get really tired of saying the same thing over and over and over again. While on the other side, the Shreve campaign it was like it was like a ping pong ball. I mean, they just pinged from this issue to that issue to this issue to that issue. And there wasn't much of a cohesive message that I think could break through. And so that's where I feel like by focusing on those issues, they're polling well, they're testing well. Mayor Hogsett did a good job. And I think that's one of the ways that in the world of micro-targeting, he was able to bring out a lot of voters who may have stayed home or may not be as enthusiastic in 2024.
Yeah. Tony, what's your response to that? Where did things go wrong for the Shreve campaign in your view?
Well, he stumbled a little bit early on with the conservative base, and I think he would admit that. But I think he got his footing, and his message was out there. I just think it's night and day between the turnout. We've been talking about turnout a little bit now in a municipal race versus next year in a presidential race. Voters care about the problems that you're seeing in big Democrat-run cities and across the country, with crime, with drugs coming over the border, with the border being open, with the economy and the rise in inflation that we've seen over the last 3 years under Joe Biden. Voters care about those issues, but when you don't get enough of them out, then the advantage goes to those that are more enthusiastic about some of these issues, like abortion. And we've seen that in Indianapolis and in others. Democrats did obviously a better job of getting their vote out. But I think when you have a presidential and a gubernatorial race next year in 2024, it's going to be night and day. It's going to be a whole different election. And most of that will be because of the issues that voters care about. They know things are worse in our big cities, including Indianapolis, than they were 8 years ago. They know things are worse nationally than they were when Donald Trump was president. I mean, I could go across the board and crime, inflation, what we're seeing on as far as wars breaking out all over the world. That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Those voters are going to come out, and you're going to see a difference in 2024.
Laura, are you surprised turnout wasn't higher given some of the sharply higher early voting numbers that we saw this year?
I still think turnout was good for a local election cycle.
Yeah.
I think the disappointment might be given, especially if you're looking at Marion County and Indianapolis, how much money was spent, how exciting the campaigns were. You would have had to have lived under a rock to have avoided any of those advertisements. So if you didn't know much about the mayor's race, and oftentimes it's seen as a low information election, right? This was not that year. I do think, obviously, when we're looking at the lower voter turnout in terms of day of, and it was still, comparable to what we've seen in the past, but knowing that we have early voting, we make assumptions that maybe that's reaching people who wouldn't otherwise vote. And what it seems to be clear, at least in this election cycle, is that it was an opportunity for those who do usually vote on election day, but hey, they could get it out of the way and they get it done early, and then they have Tuesday off and they don't have to worry about it, whatever it might be. It's still great to have. It's a good opportunity for people to be engaged. It just might not be pulling in new voters. It's taking voters in a different direction. But 26% for local elections, I know it's not super great, but that is still relatively good in comparison for what we're used to seeing.
It's better than what we saw 4 years ago, Robin. But were you expecting it to be even higher given those early voting numbers that we did see?
I think people are Dan. I think people are picking more and more easy ways to do lots of things, and if you can figure out a way to vote early that make things easier on you to be able to get your vote cast and move on out of the way, people want to do that. I also think that it's convenience. Remember, we're a vote center county. I didn't vote in my traditional precinct today. I voted over in Speedway. So I think that's also part of it, is that people are figuring out a way to go vote. I also think, though, that we need to, as a state, extend the number of hours that people can vote. We are still Ozzie and Harriet Nelson. Everybody's not home at 5 o'clock. And I think we need to go till 7. Pennsylvania, my home state, goes until 7. I think that we ought to extend the number of hours that people can vote so that we could expand the number of people voting. I also, Dan, think that, we ought to make more and more opportunities for people to be able to register to vote closer to the election. 30 days out is an eternity. We registered 81,000 people to vote about 5 years ago through a nonprofit. That's too far in advance. People get tuned in later. Look at the ads. Look at the number of ads that you all seen on your station in the last few weeks. If people could get tuned in and could vote or register to vote later, I think we'd have a higher turnout. Also, one last thing, presidential turnout. Barack Obama won 12 counties. When we helped Glenda Sue Rich, she won 31. They still won statewide. So while people may bemoan the fact that larger cities are being run by Democrats or have Democrats as leadership, LBJ once said, it doesn't matter if you don't know how to count. And the reality is that the number of votes that we have to focus on are still in a lot of our major cities, and our candidates next year need to keep that in mind as they move forward.
Mike, what's your response to that from your side of the aisle there from the Jefferson-Shreve Watch Party? What lessons do Republicans take from this election here at the local level? What lessons do Republicans take, Mike, from this election at the local level this year?
Well, I think I have to agree with Tony. This was a tough year. It may or may not signal, a deep trough for the Republicans here in Marion County. It could last years. I mean, nothing is forever. The worm always turns. But I will tell you that next year is going to be a different year. A new CNN poll out just tonight shows that Biden has sunk to 39% approval rating. In the right track, wrong track for the nation. Americans think that only 29% of Americans think the country's going in the right direction, 72% the wrong direction. And I will bet every one of you a steak dinner at St. Elmo's that Joe Biden will not be the nominee come November for the presidency. He will not be the nominee, guaranteed.
Wow. Laura, what's your reaction to that? And as you look ahead to 2024, not just the race for president, though there are some concerning numbers there for Democrats. What does that mean statewide for your party? Presidential years, obviously, there's a lot of turnout, and people tend to vote straight ticket. There are races for governor, for Senate next year. Is that concerning for Democrats here in Indiana with the way things are shaping up at the national level?
Well, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, and I was hoping not to think about 2024 until at least tomorrow at noon. I was trying to give myself a little bit of grace time before having to really think about it. But what I would say is this: is that it's a year out from now. A lot can happen in a year. I mean, in 2016, Mike Pence was running for governor of Indiana, and that changed in July. I don't think any of us could have predicted that he was going to be the vice presidential candidate with Donald Trump. So a lot can change. A lot can happen during that time. I think that folks tend to get caught up in polling a year out and get themselves incredibly concerned. Whereas a lot can happen with Donald Trump. He's in court nearly every single day on umpteen charges, umpteen felony cases, umpteen things that he's there for. So I don't think that we can sit and look at a crystal ball and say this is exactly how this is going to go. I will say, though, that one of the things that we are finding with Democrats is that there is a lot of enthusiasm. You can definitely see that in some of these smaller communities and in these cities where we had Democrat mayors come in and win. So there's a lot of enthusiasm, and those are important communities such as Evansville, Fort Wayne, Indianapolis. Those are also important communities for us when we are going into a presidential, senatorial, and gubernatorial year. The other thing that's a little bit of an outlier is we have an incredibly crowded primary with the governor's candidates. I can't tell you how many folks I saw out at the vote center where I was at over the weekend trying to get signatures. So that in itself is going to be incredibly expensive. It's going to be incredibly divisive. It's going to be incredibly challenging. And sometimes you can have arguments and fights and wounds that last for generations. So can't discount all of that out there. It's going to be a year unlike any other, but I don't think that we need to count the Democrats out just yet.
So that's 2024. Tonight, we're talking, of course, about 2023 as well. And the big news again in Indianapolis, Mayor Hogsett elected to a third term as mayor, while in Carmel, Sue Finkham will be the mayor in Carmel, winning tonight over Miles Nelson. We're going to be wrapping it up here with our panel. Before we do, quickly, some final thoughts on what we've seen tonight. And Brian Gaddy, I'll start with you.
Just to reiterate, like I said earlier, Indianapolis is a blue city. It will remain a blue city. And we Hoosier Democrats can build on the success of Marion County Democrats. And not just Indianapolis, other cities throughout the state. We've done very well tonight. And there's no doubt about it, the Marion County Democratic Party is leading our party throughout the state to success. And I think Indiana at some point is going to be more competitive statewide for Democrats. So we Democrats have a lot to build on, and we have a lot to celebrate tonight.
Tony Samuel, some final thoughts.
Well, I agree. The numbers are there in our big cities across the country, including Indianapolis, for the Democrats. But please don't rest on those numbers. Do the job. Don't just try to win statewide and nationally because of the big cities. You've got to improve these cities because they're going to heck, and we've got to fix that. Like I said earlier, things are going to be different in 2024, and we're here tonight talking about 2023. But you've got to take the lessons. Lower turnout than will be, than we'll see in 2024. That will bode well for Republicans. A lot of problems across the country. And just to piggyback on what Mike said, Donald Trump is now leading Joe Biden in 5 of 6 key states: Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. and only losing barely in Wisconsin. So, and I agree. I don't think Joe Biden will be the nominee, and you've already got Democrat leading pundits calling for him to not run again. So, you're going to take 2023 and the lessons learned. Both parties are going to do it, apply them to 2024. But you've also got just a whole different set of dynamics with the voter turnout.
Robin, your response to that and your big takeaways from tonight as we wrap things up.
Well, first off, you have excellent panelists tonight. I mean, everybody brought a different perspective to this discussion. Mike, I'll bet you a dinner at Country Kitchen that Joe Biden will be our nominee in 2024. See you there. I'll have the collards. You can have the macaroni and cheese. The real bottom line is that let's look at it let's step back from the center and look over the whole field. Evansville, Lloyd Winnicke leaves, very popular Republican mayor, endorsed Ratcher in a primary. She wins, and then she loses. In Terre Haute, Duke Bennett, a very nice man, and he was the incumbent Republican. He loses. Here in Indianapolis, Joe Hogsett's outspent by 2.5 times probably when the smoke clears in his race. Even the former governor, Mitch Daniels, jumped in, wrote a letter to Marion County residents saying he was supporting Jefferson Shreve, but Joe Hogsett won. And then obviously Jim Mueller in South Bend, and then Tom Didier lost to Tom Henry in Fort Wayne, and then Northwest Indiana, we won those seats up there. Why do I say this? Because it's a prelude. When I was chair, our goal was to win as many of the big cities as we could because we knew we were getting ready for a gubernatorial election. Winning those cities, while they may not, from a macro, luckily state law doesn't require you to carry a majority of the 92 counties. You just have to win the state. So let's not forget how important that is. Finally, I think that Laura Beck is right. She is 100% right that we should not be focused on 24. We just are a few hours from closing the polls in 23. We're 362 days away, depending upon who's counting, from the next election. That's a long time. So there are a lot of things that can happen. And then finally, Dan, let's look at what happened today. People went to vote. And nobody's screaming and yelling, at least not yet, that the election was stolen, that the votes weren't counted, that there was widespread fraud, that there was nothing going on. So the bottom line is that people in our state continue to be what we always prove to be, which is good, solid Midwest values and honor the democracy that we live in. So Mike, I think that's important.
Mike, your response to that, your final thoughts for the night there from the street.
I think before we say that the election was not stolen, somebody needs to ask Tony's opinion on that. But I will say that seriously, these issues that were brought up during the campaign, the murder rate, the fact that we're the 4th highest drug overdose death rate in the nation, these problems are not just Republican problems or Democratic problems. They cross all demographics, all neighborhoods. It's incumbent upon us to frankly help Joe Hogsett solve them because it's our city. It's not his city or my city. It's our city. We need to get to work together.
Laura, your final thoughts for the night before we wrap things up.
Well, I have to say, I have really enjoyed Mike Murphy Stringer here with the live. I mean, it's like in real time.
He's right there.
It. So I never get to see Mike Murphy in this moment. So I've really enjoyed it. It's been really great to be with everybody. I think a couple of takeaways for me is that the Democratic Party is building a bench, as Robin said earlier. We've got some new faces, some old faces, but some people who've got some really good experience to help us continue to move the city forward. I think we can expect to see the city council continue to work in a bipartisan way, which they have, and I think we'll continue to see that. I think it's exciting to see a mayor like Tom Henry come back for more. He has completely revitalized and reinvigorated Fort Wayne. We had some wins down south. Treva Hodges is a mayor. Again, we've had Evansville, we had Deb Whitfield, we had our, Jim Kaufman even in Beech Grove. So we've got some new faces, we've got some old faces. I think we are well positioned, especially as we continue to do the work we're going to do in Hamilton County. I think that we're going to have a stronghold there eventually, someday. But I also think, as Robin said, this is a good day for our democracy. It really is. I was at an early vote site all weekend, and then I was out working the polls at election day, and it was really heartening to see Democrats, Republicans, the candidates all standing there, all being respectful, everyone talking, laughing, having a good time. At the end of the day, we're Hoosiers and we come together to get the job done. And I think that's what we have to focus on, especially as we continue to build Indianapolis.
I'll give the doctors the final word here. Martin, your big takeaways from tonight as we wrap things up.
Just a couple of points. I think Republicans are really going to have to do some soul searching here. How are they going to get through the abortion issue? Kentucky should have been a slam dunk, right? You're going to have an open seat in the Senate there, we think, in the next, if not 2024, 2026. And so they're going to have to figure out how can they put us forth a statewide candidate. They should be winning in Kentucky pretty easily, and that they're not tells you something. And I will say, I'm not sure about taking the bet on either Country Kitchen or St. Elmo's. I might need something a little more heart healthy. But if you want the historical look at this, or what the precedent might be, Lyndon Baines Johnson, right? Incumbent president gets in trouble from the left in his party, is running for re-election, and then drops out. And obviously then the Democrats lose the election to Nixon. So we'll see if I'm not sure that will happen with Biden, but he is going to face some serious criticism from his left flank, particularly on Hamas Israel issue. And so we'll see how that shakes out. And he's able to hold together what essentially is sort of the classic old school Democratic ideals, whether he can maintain that as we go forward.
Laura, you get the final word here on the big winners and losers of this evening on this election night in Indiana.
Yeah, well, I think two things. They're old adages that we would always say and the scholarship would prove. And one of them I think has been upheld, and the other one we may want to revisit. The first thing is incumbency advantage matters. And there were a lot of mayor's races we're talking about that were open seats, so incumbency advantage is void. But if you look in terms of Anderson with Thomas Broderick, or if you're looking in Indianapolis with Joe Hogsett, or even Kentucky with Andy Beshear, right? Having the value of incumbency, having name recognition, having experience in office, having a war chest, it really does matter. And I think in the cases where you had the incumbent running again for office, it very clearly had an edge up in terms of this evening for the election outcome. The other thing that I think we might revisit, and we usually would say this in a local election cycle, is that all politics is local. Like, yes, there might be partisan labels, and we may be talking about some national issues, but typically we've thought of it as community politics. It's issues with potholes and crime and homelessness and things that felt isolated from some of the larger national issues. But to many of the points that have been made, the nationalization has become more and more pervasive. I think it's most especially when we're talking about the abortion issue. It's something that really has no place in local elections, but was a major talking point. And that is, it resonates with certain voters. I think we're going to see more nationalization in our local politics. And when we usually say all politics is local, I don't know that that was necessarily the case here in 2023.
All right. A great thought to wrap things up there. Our thanks to the entire panel for being with us. We'll see you tonight on Fox 59 and CBS 4 at 10 and 11, and on this week's edition of In Focus. Thanks for being with us tonight on this election night in Indiana.